that you would just give your all. You had children for them. You just did everything humanly possible to please them and do what they wanted to and work hard, and everything was them, and they were never happy. My mom and dad both told me they didn't want to have 4 girls. They wanted to have a son, and then I was the last one. And my mom even told me that when you were born, I didn't want you. I told the nurse to take you out of the room, to give you to somebody else, and I cursed God, and I just wanted you to just die.
This is Elizabeth Nielsen. Elizabeth's parents became members of the post-raid Short Creek group, the largest polygamous community in the United States. Immigrants from Germany, they never practiced polygamy, but encouraged Elizabeth and her 3 sisters to enter plural marriages.
By the time I was 8 or 9, I'd boast with my parents, well, I don't care if I'm the first wife or the 10th wife. I just want to be a righteous woman.
Elizabeth first married at the age of 14, becoming her new husband's second wife.
The council had told him that I would be really easy to love because I was so young and flexible and all that stuff. They told him to have extra consideration for his first wife. So at that point, he would spend 2 nights with her and 1 night with me.
She later divorced and remarried again in polygamy, this time as a 3rd wife. She bore 8 children from her first marriage and 4 from her second. When I asked Elizabeth for some family photographs, she told me they were with one of her daughters who had married into a polygamous community in Mexico. Stored with her photos, Elizabeth left drawings for her screenplay based on bedtime stories she had told her children. Elizabeth hoped that this screenplay would finally help her escape poverty and the pressures from the polygamous community. Since many of the places Elizabeth had lived were en route to the Chihuahua province of northern Mexico, we decided to revisit them. The first stop on our trip was an isolated ranch on the border of Bryce Canyon, Utah, where Elizabeth lived while married to her second husband.
This driveway used to just be mud. I mean, it was just clay, and when you walked on it, you'd have like 3 inches of mud stick to your shoes. This was the trailer that I lived in, and there used to be kind of a camp right here that I used to cook breakfast on. Where that table stands used to be an old cookout thing that was made with bricks. They've tore that down since then. There was an old refrigerator here I used to keep some things in. Of course, there was no fuel, there was no butane, there was no water. That tap was not there. There's a cast iron tub around the side so you could go and have a hot bath, because I couldn't stand not to take a bath. When I first got here, there were bottles and jars and just trash everywhere, old tires and old cars, and there still is tires, looks like. There wasn't enough room for all the kids to sleep in that trailer because there's only 1 bedroom, so a couple of them slept in that. It was so full of mice. The kids were scared to even be in there. Half of them would go crawl in the truck and sleep. I measured all the trailer windows and made curtains for everything, and tried real hard to make a homey. But everybody, his kids all laughed at me, thought I was crazy. But anyway.
How often did John come down here?
He would come probably every 10 to 14 days. Sometimes a month would go by before he'd come. Sometimes it was 6 weeks. Just depending on what else he was doing, whether he showed up or not. So there were long periods of time that we didn't hardly have anything to eat. I mean, the kids would take their bikes and hike down and try to charge some groceries, so we'd just have something. But we kept doing what we were supposed to do, and the kids were happy. I got more lonely and quiet evenings.
Transients defined Elizabeth's life with her second husband. For a time, he moved her to Las Vegas to be closer to him as he frequented the casinos. Although she now lived in a bigger city, Elizabeth was still isolated. She was never in one place long enough to establish friendships with her neighbors. It was not long until her husband could no longer afford rent in Las Vegas, and Elizabeth was moved to an abandoned shack in the desert.
It was kind of a panic when we left because I hadn't paid the rent because it had got gambled away. I was half afraid the landlord was going to be chasing us down. I felt really bad about it. The kids were excited because they'd been in the city for a while, and my kids liked the country, so they yelled and whooped and hollered that they could scream and the neighbors weren't going to get mad at them. And I just worked really, really hard to clean it. Shoveled out all the dirt and the dead debris and birds and mice. We were happy there for a little while, and then until it got really cold, I realized we had to move on.
I had always heard that polygamous families lived together under one roof. Why was Elizabeth so isolated and alone? The next stop in our journey was the site of the 1953 Short Creek Raid, where I hoped to find the answer to this question.
You are tuned to KCCA 107.1 FM, broadcasting from Colorado City, Arizona and Hildale, Utah. We're Southern Utah's easy variety station.
Get your Bank of Ephraim checking card this week from your home-owned and home-operated bank.
Short Creek split into two twin cities in 1962, Colorado City on the Arizona side of the border, and Hildale on the Utah side. Colorado City practices a modified version of one of Joseph Smith's original tenets called the United Order. The United Order is a communal social system in which church followers share property and goods. Colorado City's version of the United Order was incorporated as the United Effort Plan, or UEP. The UEP owns the majority of the land in both cities, and members are allowed to build their homes on church property. During the time that Elizabeth lived in Colorado City, the prophet and leader of the group was Leroy Johnson. In contrast to her second marriage, Elizabeth did live in the same house with her first husband and her sister wife.
I had a lot of hardships with my sister wife. She was a very, very jealous person. When she had cancer and she was dying right at the last, she would tell everybody that she knew that I loved her children and that I would treat them fairly, which made me respect her quite a bit because at least she could say nice things about me, even if she was really mean to my face. But behind my back, she always said nice things about me.
When Elizabeth's sister wife died of cancer, Elizabeth became the guardian of her sister wife's children as well as her own. For a time, Elizabeth continued to live in her first husband's house while her new husband lived across town. Eventually, the UEP evicted Elizabeth from her home. She was excommunicated from the church and forced to live in squalor. Elizabeth did not want to visit Colorado City alone. She insisted on bringing her daughter, granddaughter, and friend Stephanie. Stephanie, who collaborated with Elizabeth on her screenplay, still lives in Colorado City as a polygamist wife. Only days before our arrival in Colorado City, Stephanie's own mother was forced from the town. This flattened plot of land is all that remains of her mother's home,